meeting, virtual event. We were just FYI, we were talking earlier about, we're still not planning any in-person yet, but that may be coming up. So we'll probably share that at one of these virtual meetings before we actually do it, before we skip to doing it in person. So we'll keep doing these until further notice. All right, so today we have the Power Platform event with JJ Heldman. Very excited. And we're going to do some announcements before we get going, and let's go. So your developer user group team leaders. I am Melissa Shook. I am a Salesforce senior administrator at a company called Easy Texting here in Austin, Texas. I've done Salesforce for about 7-8 years, and I have 5 certifications, as I was just talking about a little earlier, and been co-leading this developer user group with Nadina, Justin, and Lindsay. And Nadina, please introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, my name is Nadina Lisbon. I'm a technical architect for Tradeshift. You've probably seen me around a lot on Twitter. I have, I think, maybe 13 certifications. Can you have enough certifications? Happy to have you all here.
I'm Justin Lisbon. I'm a technical or Salesforce technical architect at Vacasa. I only have two or three certifications. I don't do the certification thing very much. Yeah.
And Lindsay Fiveco is not here with us today, but she is. I think she's in. I'm not sure her title right now. Is it like maybe technical architect or maybe solutions architect at what is that called? What's her company called, Nadina? Do you remember? I don't remember either. I can't remember the name of her company. I know it. Like I can see the building in my head. Sorry.
Bazaar Voice?
No.
No, I don't remember. Let's
okay.
just.
Yeah, she works somewhere in Austin. She works at a company here in Austin with some others. Sorry, my brain. Okay. Next, meeting expectations. It's expected that all attendees treat each other with respect. This meeting is a safe space for everyone in the Salesforce Ohana. Announcements. All right, so July 7th at 6 p.m. we have the Salesforce admin group. They're going to have a fireside chat Q&A with Stephanie Herrera, who is an MVP who started Girly Geeks, the local chapters of Girly Geeks, started Salesforce Saturday, does tons of things with the community besides that. So that should be interesting and exciting. Also, Salesforce marketing group for Pardot. We have a Pardot Ask Me Anything, Ask Your Pardot Questions on July 28th, 5:30 Central, which I have to work her about because we are now using Pardot, and Ask Me Anything sounds like a really awesome type of event for anyone using Pardot who is not an expert yet. So I know that we have some really experienced people in that group that will be there to answer questions. Secondly, we're putting out another call for speakers. Always looking for more speakers. Anyone who wants to present, practice presenting, do it with us. We have a great group here. So if you're putting together a presentation, you're thinking about it, you did something cool, let us know, and we'll get in touch with you. And then community announcements, anything else? I think that's it. Does anyone else on this call, if you have anything to announce, I'm going to give you a minute to jump in.
Sure. Hey, hello everybody. I'm Pradeep Junalagadda. I've been in Austin for the last 5 years or so. I'm also the founder of Lattice Squad. I'm an architect and founder of Lattice Squad. We are based in Austin, so we are a local company. We specialize in communities and custom development on Salesforce. We recently completed a custom app that integrates Twilio conference call functionality into an LWC hosted on a partner community. So currently we have availability to take on new clients, either direct or indirect or in collaboration with other consultants. So I'll be happy to drop in the details in the chat. If you have any questions, please do contact us. Thank you.
We hope to have Pradeep at a future meeting demoing his product for us.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome.
Pat McClellan and myself, we both partnered in, and so we are working on the details. Yeah.
Okay. Any other?
Pipe in here. Pradeep failed to mention he has a new product on App Exchange too. The Lightning Following Report that helps you track who's following which things in Chatter, which records in Chatter.
That's
Thank you, Pat.
nice. Awesome.
And it's free.
What's the name of that package?
It's called Lightning Following Report. I'm going to send a link
Okay.
to the report. Yep. Thanks.
Thanks.
All right. All right. Now networking. Let's start with hiring. Who's hiring? Anyone here? If their company's hiring, let us know to the community.
Yeah, hey, my name's Andy. I'm over at HEB right now, and HEB is looking for a couple of mid-level to senior Salesforce engineers. And it would you'll need a full stack skill set, couple of years with Salesforce, but mid-level developer or you're at the senior level, don't hesitate to apply. I'll post the link in the chat.
Hey, thanks, Andy. Is that a local, remote? San Antonio, or is that?
Oh yeah, great question. So the position can be currently HEB is hybrid, remote. It can also be based in Austin and San Antonio, and you have the option to go into the office.
Got it.
So, yep.
You do have an office here in Austin, right? Remote working place.
Yes, yeah, they do have the Eastside Tech Hub in Austin,
Correct.
and then the headquarters in San Antonio.
Correct.
I have my company, PayPal. Well, it's not my company, but the company I work at. We're hiring for 2 Salesforce manager roles. So we're looking for someone to come manage our Salesforce admin team. And we're looking for a manager of our Salesforce products to manage our product and QA teams. If you want more details, feel free to reach out to me. And my laptop's about to die, so I'm going to go off camera to go find a charger.
Hey, I'm Daniel, new to the Austin group. We are hiring at Techstars, a Salesforce engineer as of now. When Q3 hits, we'll be hiring additional engineers as well as admin roles.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to open it up to anyone who's looking for a job. Yeah, if I missed anyone else, let's just start with who's looking for a job. Maybe we're all booked at the moment. Don't have any job seekers at the moment?
Or shy.
I'm sorry, what?
I said, or they're shy.
Or they're shy, right? Which is, it's hard to know how long I should wait, but yeah. Jump on in if you're looking, or you put it in the chat if you want, and just put your information out there. So, all right. Well, I'm going to move on. to our speaker introduction. All right, so today we have JJ Heldman speaking at us. He has built and managed and designed hundreds of Salesforce solutions over the last dozen years. He loves governor limits and is not embarrassed to say it. Very interesting. He, when he's not working or working on his own Salesforce projects, he spends his time enjoying great food, awesome whiskey, amazing travels, and hanging out with one of the cutest cats you will ever see, which means that he's going to have to share a picture now. We don't have a camera. You're gonna have to show us. Right. JJ.
Thank you. And hello, everybody. Before I officially start the PowerPoint portion, let's break some of the shyness piece here because it's July, 4-day weekend for hopefully everybody here at least. I do need some random scoring. This will come into effect later. So I'm going to name a topic. You're going to review it 1 to 5. I'm just going to take the first couple that I hear. So just shout it out. Don't be shy. 5 being the best, 1 being the worst. Scotch.
3.
3.
Okay, 3. Got a couple 3s.
1.
1. Oh, wow. Okay. All right. New York hand-tossed pizza.
4.
3.
5.
1.
I'm gonna take.
I'll say 5. I have to say 5.
All right, got 1 in there. Bourbon.
1.
3.
That's a 5.
I'm sorry. 5. 5.
1, 5. Okay, got some 5s.
Yeah. Not 1. 5.
3.
Okay.
I was born in Kentucky. I gotta say 5.
He's like, I gotta represent. And all right, last one. Chicago deep dish pizza.
5.
6.
That's 1. That's lasagna.
Love lasagna.
So JJ, you have to explain the difference between bourbon and whiskey.
Amazingly, let's start this show. It might actually come up. So I will share my screen. I want to say, of course, thanks to the group for having me, and thanks to all of you who are attending tonight. I'll start the point here. Yes, my name is JJ Heldman. I appreciate you guys showing up. This is my first presentation in ever to a user group. So again, thank you all very much. I've been on the Salesforce platform for a dozen years. I've broken so many things I can't even tell you. So that includes platform events, which is why I want to share some of what I've learned with you guys tonight. I actually work for Evolve. Evolve makes vacation rental easy for everybody is our mission statement. We essentially deal with individuals who want to list their houses so that you can rent them for short-term vacation use. And of course, if you're the person who wants to rent them, we help you too. At Evolve, Salesforce is the core technology stack that we use. It is the central system. It is the source of truth for all of our data. So it's very large. It's very heavily customized and involves kind of 2 businesses. So it's huge. So it's really exciting. We're always hiring people. Definitely feel free to reach out to me. I've done a bunch of fun stuff with that, so I can give you more information on Evolve, of course, in the position specifics for it. And then, of course, these slides and the sample files that I made for you guys today, those will all be available after tonight's presentation. And you can find me on LinkedIn and Trailhead and all that fun stuff there. As far as our agenda goes tonight, and I actually can't see you guys as a heads up. I can only see my PowerPoint. So if you have questions, definitely feel free to interrupt me while I'm talking here. But the main topics we'll be covering tonight are what are platform events and kind of the context of them, which is even more important in my opinion. How platform events are built, some use cases for platform events, which will be a big chunk of tonight's presentation. Design considerations and governance limits, that'll be the other big chunk of tonight's presentation. And there is, again, dedicated time for kind of question and answer at the end, which you're more than welcome to wait. But again, if you have questions in between, feel free to ask me. If it is something I'm going to cover later, I will tell you that, and we'll bounce to that topic at a different time. There'll be some other sub things that come up that you might see on the right during this. So including the difference between bourbon and scotch, actually. So will probably show up. Of course, all of these, you guys, I'm sure if this is not your first rodeo, you've been to something like this. I don't plan on making forward-looking statements about Salesforce. I do actually plan to make one about Amazon Web Services. So take this as generically. Buy based on, if you are buying products based on what's available today and not based on what they might be doing. In this particular case, we have two forward-looking statements. Just kind of an FYI. We're going to talk a lot tonight about whiskey and pizza. It's going to come up a couple times for the demos. All your purchasing decisions should be based on your preferences and not mine. So FYI, please consume both responsibly. So unless anybody has any questions to start, then we will get into it. All right. So what are platform events? And let's start with kind of the text heavy stuff as we kind of switch in. So platform events to Salesforce and to a design pattern, essentially called pub sub that we'll talk about. The event itself is kind of the central point. A platform event is a way to listen to a message and then tell people interested in that message or tell things interested in that message as one central hub. So Salesforce defines their platform events is what I have italicized here. These enable developers to deliver secure, scalable, and customizable event notifications within the Salesforce platform or from external sources. That part we're going to touch quite a bit on later. But platform events in the context of a larger picture, and this is, I think, the more important part, they really promote what's called a publish sub architecture, or publish subscriber architecture. Some of you may already be familiar with that, of course. For those of you that are not, what that is you have a publisher, you have something that's sending a message. A record was created, a record was updated, an event happened, this thing changed, okay, or this thing is new. So it's sending a message. What it's doing is it's sending that message to a queue, and that's commonly called an event bus. Some of us old schoolers might call it an event broker. It used to be what it was called back in the day. But the platform event in the Salesforce world is that event queue. That's an event bus, right? It's the thing listening to those events coming in from publishers. So something saying, hey, I changed something, I'm new, I did this, and that platform event is listening to that. And what that platform event does is it tells subscribers or things that are interested, that may be interested in that message happening. They're subscribed to that event bus. The message itself, kind of important to point out, it's really just a record. It's just a data structure. Think of an account record in a table, or think of an inner class in Apex, or a JSON portion of a payload in a REST service. Like it's just a key a value kind of data pair record, essentially. So a lot of text on that one, so my apologies. So let's draw that out a bit. So what that looks like in this particular model here, this particular example, is that topic A and topic B in this picture are platform events to Salesforce. But this is our event bus, okay? They're being told by the publisher on the left there, like, hey, the publisher is saying something happened. I did something. I created something. I changed something. And topic A is listening to that message. The publisher is telling it. And it says, oh, okay, well, I have two subscribers. I have subscriber 1 and subscriber 2 on the right that are interested when I hear something. When I'm told something, I'm going to tell these guys that this happened, okay? Topic B has 1 subscriber. That's subscriber 3 in that image there. Also got a message from the publisher. And topic B is telling the subscriber, hey, this thing happened. What this architecture buys you, and this is going to come into play with, the use cases we'll talk tonight, but also for your own considerations in your environment. What this architecture buys you is it completely separates the publisher from having to know anything about the actual end result of subscribers and vice versa. So a publisher, a record being created, something changing, something happening, a web service happening, all those things, those are just publishing messages in the generic context. Something happened. And if you're publishing to an event queue, then the subscribers can really just listen to the event queue, which means I can change that publisher on the left as often as I want without ever touching the subscribers, because they don't know anything about each other. I can add subscribers without ever changing a publisher. And I think you'll see that in some of the examples that we'll do tonight. But the architecture itself is very it's kind of commonplace. It's getting way more commonplace nowadays, but it's very powerful if you haven't implemented it for yourself yet. So let's talk a human example, a little humanistic example here. In our case, in all the examples that I made for you tonight, we're doing reviews. Okay, so topic A and topic B, these are platform events that manage reviews. Okay, just generic. Everybody likes to do reviews. This was great. This sucks. Blah blah blah, etc. 1 star, 5 star, 3.33 stars, whatever. So these are managing reviews, and our publisher in this case is going to be me. I'm going to be reviewing this whiskey that I'm drinking. Stay hydrated during these things, right? And I'm going to be like, hey, you know what? I like this whiskey. I'm the publisher. I'm sending a message saying this is my opinion of this particular topic. This is my review. So I would be telling topic A about this case. We'll say that's listening to beverage reviews. And it's like, oh, well, I have subscriber 1. I'm going to tell subscriber 1 that you told me you like this whiskey, but this subscriber actually doesn't care. It only deals with rum. So it's going to ignore it. And subscriber 2 is also listening to that event. It does care. It's like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to go do something. I'm going to do something with that information now that I know that you published this review. I also happen to tell in this example, topic B, a different review event, but its purpose in this case, in this picture, is to sell subscriber 3, which is a third-party system. It's going to tell a website to update numbers, or it's going to tell AWS to run a Lambda function and do something with that information. So this kind of generic infrastructure for a platform event is really kind of shorthand for what I really want to drive home tonight, which is this publisher subscriber model, essentially. So that's the first part of that. And we're going to start. Our first example right now is actually going to be, I'm going to show you a basic how to actually build a platform event here in Salesforce, which is very, very simple here. And don't make fun of my classic for you Lightning guys. I'll switch to Lightning in a bit. Don't worry. But when you log into the Salesforce environment, we're going to cover the absolute basics of this. So I am going to skip some points you guys will see on the screen. I want to give you a fair warning. We will come back to that when we talk about design considerations and governance limits. So I'll point those out. But as far as the absolute basics go, to create everything I just talked about so you can play with your own example in your own environment, I'm going to show you the basics here right now. And from your setup menu, of course, you can simply search in the quick find for platform events. This is standard on I believe every Salesforce edition, although I don't personally work with the nonprofit one, so I'm not 100% certain about that. But you should have platform event capability at a basic level in there. And when you go to your platform events, yours will be empty to start off. Of course, these are some of the examples that I made tonight. But you should have a new platform event button. And for anybody in this group who's made a custom table, which I'm going to venture is all of you, this is the same. You're going to label it. You can, of course, add a plural. You can make it a vowel sound, of course. That object name is going to come through as the API name, just like a custom table. And you can add a description here. And you have a development and deployed option. These two options, I promise, I will come back to. We're going to leave these as default right now. But we will talk about this with governance limits and design considerations. But at the absolute basic level, this is it. You fill this out, you hit save, you're done. You have a platform event. And what that takes us to for a very basic one, our very first one that I made for you guys today, is this POC review. This screen, of course, also very similar to a standard custom object. There's not a whole lot of difference. I would point out the API name ends in a _E. That is what represents to you, to the developer, somebody working with code or the metadata, that this is a platform event and not a custom table in Salesforce. So _E. There are some standard fields who created it, created date. I am going to skip, again, for the very basics, you don't even need this stuff, but I am going to come back and talk about the event the event's unique ID and the replay ID. We'll talk about that later. But you'll have the option to add custom fields to this, just like a table. When you add custom fields, this isn't a table, this is an event. But when you add, so you're not going to get master detail relationship, you're not going to get lookup, you're not going to get formulas, and we'll highlight a lot of those reasons throughout this. But you do get all of your primitive data types. You get booleans in the form of checkboxes. You get your dates and your date times. You get your integers. You get your strings. And then you do have a text area long, which we'll talk about specifically later too. But you're able to go through and create custom fields just like a table in Salesforce. And you're able to add triggers to those custom fields. Triggers to that platform event, just like you can for a custom object, essentially. And so I've added 2 triggers to this. I have a POC trigger for our RUM subscriber, just like our example that we showed. And I have a POC review trigger for our whiskey subscriber, like the example that we showed. So this table, right, putting the triggers aside, this table alone is the platform event. Like at the end of the day, like you could be like, yep, I went to the presentation, I know how to make these, I'm done, right? So they're that simple. It's pretty basic. But again, the pub sub thing in general, that's really kind of a highlighting point of this. So how might we use this here, right? So this being my event, this being my event bus or my event broker, that's just one part of the model, right? I need a way to publish events. So in this case, I built a basic Salesforce Apex class. We have a nice little static method here. That static method is going to go through and take a score that I give it, and it's going to take a type that I'm applying to it. It's going to create one of these POC review events. For those of you already familiar with Apex, this is just like creating an object in Apex. Instead of using a insert or an upsert statement, however, you use a publish statement. And this is publishing your event. And if you're curious, yes, this does count as a DML limit. It does count as an insert limit in your execution context. So I'm going to publish a list of these events. My example events, I created 3. I created one for whiskey, I created one for rum, and I created one for lemonade, because who doesn't like lemonade, right? Come on, why not? So I have these 3 different events that we published here. And when I take these, I'm going to run this through just, typical execute anonymous, or, you could do this through the developer, the interface in Visual Studio Code or Workbench, whatever you prefer. But I'm going to execute this real quick. And what I'm doing is this would be publishing those 3 events. So this is the publish portion of our pub sub model. Our platform events, of course, this object that we created is the actual event bus. This is what's listening to that event being published. And then, of course, we need our 3rd piece to that, which is our subscribers. And in this case, our subscribers are those 2 triggers I pointed out. I have one trigger that's going to say, hey, whiskey got called. This is the number of events I got. And if there is a review that is a type whiskey, then it will debug simply another statement for us. And our rum trigger does the exact same thing. Hey, rum got called. This is the number of events I got. And it will debug the rum statement for us. So at the very basic POC demo level, I'm going to publish these. And we'll take a look at what happens. Now, when you're building Scratchworks, I'm not going to lie, it takes a while for the debug statements to catch up with platform events. Your very first day, it'll take quite a while. It could take up to 30 minutes to start getting your first debugs. It's a little annoying. I set this up 4 days ago, so we are getting these right off the bat, which is great. When you debug these, by default, platform events run as the Salesforce automated process user. So the publish action ran as me. I'm user in this Scratchwork. But the actual firing of the event, i.e. the trigger, the subscriber, that runs as automated process. So keep that in mind when you're debugging. You're going to want to look at your automated process users. And for the simplicity's sake, right, we have whiskey got called. It got 3 events. It got one for whiskey, it got one for rum, and it got one for lemonade. But it only cared about the whiskey one. So we only have one more debug here as a whiskey subscriber. Our second debug log, same thing with rum. It got called. There was also 3 events, but only one of those was rum. So it was only going to act on one of those. You'll notice that lemonade was also sent to both of them. Both subscribers, both triggers got all 3 events. It's just that one of them was whiskey, so that was handled by one subscriber. One was rum, so it was handled by this subscriber. Lemonade isn't accounted for by any subscriber, so nobody did anything with it, right? And you can make a different lemonade listener or a different code base to handle that. So that is the entire kind of pub sub model at the base level that you could create as an example today, hopefully right now, and see how that works essentially in that type of architecture model for the basic level. Should you have 2 triggers on your platform event? No, right? You should do a trigger pattern that's a little bit more specific, of course, quite a bit better, something more like what we saw at the beginning of this year with Mitch Spano. He did a fantastic presentation on that. Can your code be way more complicated and complex? Yes, in my opinion, if you're building a POC, if you're playing with something for the first time, don't worry about the best practice stuff. Like, get it to work, make sure you understand how it's working, then make it fit all the best practices, right? And so this is an example of getting it to work. And last thing I'll point out on our base level is in the package files itself, all of those for just that basic level example. If this is all brand new to you, great. Again, thanks for attending. All you need is the POC example marked ones. So you can ignore all the other stuff and play around with just the POC marked ones at first, and then you could get to these a little bit later. So any questions on that? And if not, I will continue.
I have one question. So
Yep.
Daniel asked, what's the easiest way you found to create platform event metadata and all those fields?
The easiest way I found to create them? Wow. I don't know. I mean, honestly, I pretty much still generally create them through the user interface. We're doing a lot of unlock package work, so we're very big into building on Scratch orgs. We actually have a template that'll help us produce platform events. And all the code that kind of wraps around it for the basic stuff. So yeah, we're nothing super fancy, I would say, mostly just interface for us. Yeah. A good question.
Hey, JJ, can you talk a little bit about the publish behavior, the publish after commit or publish immediately?
Yes, we will cover that a bit more with design considerations. Okay. So a little bit later in this presentation, I will come back to this and we will cover both of those behaviors. Yes. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Well, all right. Then, excellent stuff. So moving through, subscribers again, and how to build them. So again, there's our basic example, and that does cover our basics for tonight. So I do want to get into use cases, why you might use some of these, why in my opinion you should seriously consider starting to implement these probably sooner rather than later, and then a couple other kind of cool things that you can do with them. So first things that potentially that you could utilize these for in your own environment are future replacements. So for those of you familiar with asynchronous threads or at future calls in Apex code, little annotation that gets marked on a function. Essentially during an execution context, you call an at future call, it spawns a new execution context. It's a fun topic on its own. I'll skip most of that. But basically, the difference between a future call and an event bus publish call, right? So both of them are near real time. Salesforce does not provide an SLA on either as far as guaranteed delivery time, but in general, they're going to happen under a minute. They both get queued up on Salesforce servers to get processed. Very similar in that particular handling chain. For those of you familiar, though, with future calls and batch jobs, they can't be chained with other async calls. This could be a little limiting, right? So you can have, essentially speaking, and there's definitely design patterns around it, but you can't have your batch jobs call future calls. Your platform events, on the other hand, can call anything they want, including other platform events. In fact, they can call themselves, which is very powerful. It's also very easy to break. I know, because I did that once. But you can chain your platform events to each other as well as to themselves if you need to, and that is very, very useful. And then async calls. So this is one of the things with Salesforce. I love Salesforce. Again, I've been doing this a dozen years. One of my annoyances with Salesforce is that at a bare minimum level, if you have less than 1,250 users in your environment, you get 250,000 async calls a day. That is not a lot when Salesforce is your primary technology system. It is just a weak number, and you cannot buy more unless you buy more user licenses. And when you're running on an org with 500 people, you don't need more user licenses. So it's very, very expensive. Unlike platform events, which you can not only buy more of, you get 250,000 published per hour baseline. That's out of the gate. There is a different limitation to that. We will talk about that a little bit later, so don't let it totally fool you. But as far as publishing those in comparison to doing batch jobs or doing future calls, much more powerful. You get a much higher governance threshold for that. So this would be the first thing that I would challenge you to kind of consider in your environment. Can you replace future calls with platform events? Second one, talk about some UI stuff. Everybody likes to look at the UI a little bit. Back in the day, I was working on a project. We had to make, somebody wanted to do live messaging to their agents on the phone, right? So we had Visual Force back then. Lightning wasn't even really a thing. So you had Visual Force and you had JavaScript libraries of different types. We used a Comet D JavaScript library. Some of you may already be familiar with that. But basically what we did was we built a custom table. Somebody could add a message to that table, and this Comet D JavaScript library was listening to that table. And when a new record came in, it would show a message to a user. And you're thinking, wow, that might be really cool. Yeah, it was really kind of a pain, right? You had to manage the table all the time. The messages were only good for like 30 minutes, right? Because they're just supposed to be like fast, like, you know, push this product or mention this thing, or this is the goal for this hour. So this thing would just fill up all the time. You have thousands of people, well, not thousands, you had hundreds of people putting messages into this table to just kind of like span out to this user side. So a lot of maintenance for this. You can do all this with platform events and Lightning Web Component with literally no maintenance. And then the best part is like a couple years ago, you had to figure all this out on your own. There wasn't real, I mean, Google is obviously, right? You're a great developer if you're a great Googler, right? That's the rumor, I think. So we did a lot of Googling, but you still had to do a lot of, you know, kind of figuring that out. What I'm going to show you guys right here, Lightning Web Component, this design section. And if you're not familiar with this entire thing here, this is also a link in the presentation. They give you a template. This is it. I literally copied and pasted this and changed the event name. And that was all I did. So I'm going to show you guys this in Lightning real quick. In these sample files, there is a platform event demo app and a permission set that'll cover all this stuff for you guys. On the home page, I have this POC review events. I am going to go turn on the developer tools in Chrome so that we can see kind of what's happening behind the scenes here. Clear this out. So I'm going to subscribe to this event. I'm going to click this button, and this is opening a subscription. It's opening a listener. This is now a subscriber to the POC review event. Okay. I'm going to republish my event. I'm republishing just through the same Apex class. You could publish these through flows. You can publish these through process builders. You can publish these through web services, which we'll look at. But I'm going to execute that real quick. This is the listener, and these are the 3 events that it got. It got our whiskey event at 8. It got our rum event at a score of 2, and it got our lemonade event at a score of 5. Just like what you saw earlier, kind of debugged out through the triggers. If you were a barely better front-end developer than me, you could make this actually do something when it got this event. I didn't go that far. But basically, this is literally, you could just take this as your baseline piece from this document. This is exactly what I did. The sample's in this project file for you guys. And you can react to receiving these events. So when you have your users using a front-end component and subscribe to specific channels, which you can automate, you don't have to make them click to do it. You can start changing their interface based on what's happening behind the scenes with records they're not even working with or looking at that current time. Very cool stuff with that. Another use case. This is one of my favorite use cases because it's one of those messy things that's really hard to describe, right? But we all have this to some extent, or most of us probably have this to some extent within our environment, right? You have object A and object B, and this thing happens and we need to go update a case. I'm going to pick on cases because I think they're the easiest target in this example, right? But if every time an account changes, we're going to go find cases and we're going to update the last contact. Every time a lead changes, we're going to go find cases and we're going to update the last contact. Every time somebody's using a Lightning Web Component on this particular screen, or they're in this community, or this little automation happens, or somebody fires this quick action, we're going to go find a case and we're going to update these values, right? Like you probably have a lot of code just trying to figure out which case to go update, right? Like something happened, go update this case, right? And of course, better architecture, better systems is probably centralizing that code as much as it can, but you're still going to have this big kind of random mess, even in a collection of files of like, did that thing come from that Lightning Web Component button? Did that thing come from that quick action being clicked? Did that thing from the account trigger happen? Those two things are tightly coupled to each other. You may have that one file that's updating cases for you, but it's intentionally being called by that Lightning Web Component. It's specifically being called by that quick action, or it's specifically being called by that flow or trigger. A lot of that's just super hard to replace, and it's super hard to work on without having to retest all of that. Well, all those other things can simply just fire an event. Hey, go update cases. And then you have that platform event calling that same case logic, right? Hey, you just need to change the case based on this ID or based on this data point that I got from this event, right? Now I can replace any one of those publishers that says you need to go update a case because this thing happened. I can throw them away. I can add new ones. I can change how they function, all without worrying about the case code, and vice versa. I can change the case code without worrying about any of those publishers. And that makes QA's life easier. It makes products life easier. It just gives you a lot of flexibility in running more complex operations. Obviously, replace the word case with custom object, replace the word case with opportunity, depending on your particular type of work. But I'm sure you can all relate to some degree of, wow, we really have something that's really kind of all centrally tied to a whole bunch of other stuff. It's very hard to touch, and this helps you get around that quite a bit. Last but not least, as far as my use cases go for this, I'll show you guys an example of this, and it's as a web service replacement. And, kind of as a comparison again, an HTTP request that you code in Apex, it allows you to communicate with a third-party system, can't call it from a trigger. Platform event subscription allows communication with a third-party system, and that's just the object. Now, you can still put an Apex trigger on that object, but it's still a trigger, so you can't call a third-party service from your trigger. But you don't need to, because your third-party service like MuleSoft, Dell Boomi, Cloud Elements, soon to be Safe Harbor, forward-looking statement, AWS Event Bridge, supposedly, can just listen to that table. So when you save a platform event, those external systems are just hooked up to that. There's no custom code. Every developer here who's written that stuff, there's no you figuring out how to authenticate with the other system for 3 days before it takes you an hour to build the REST service, right? There's no managing your tokens. There's no building your custom settings or your custom metadata to share, save your authentication token. You have to reset it every 3 hours, and you're figuring out what that timing is. All that stuff goes away. You just here's an event. I'm going to fire an event, and you guys are just hooked up to that. You're just listening to this thing happening. And then, they pick up that event, and there you go. So it makes it so much simpler to work with those third-party systems. Really helps, again, when Salesforce is the central source, when it's your big technology and everybody's kind of reacting to it particularly, it's really handy. But even if it's not your central technology, if you're communicating with a third-party system, either externally or they're talking in, a platform event is a very, very handy shortcut to building that custom functionality. And I'm going to show you guys an example of that right now, actually, with our earlier reviews. In your platform event devil, we have a beverages table. I'm going to get rid of this console. We don't need it for the rest of this. We have our bourbon and scotch, right? Some average score values. We have our pizzas, right? With some average score values. They're all at zeros right now because we haven't done any actual reviews yet. Right? So we don't have any reviews in. So in my platform events table over here, what I do have is 2 other events. I have a beverage review event and I have a pizza event. Very basic example. I have a score. I have a type. This is specific to beverages. The other one is specific to pizzas. Otherwise, they're basically the same. They each have one trigger. When it looks at the code here, let's go over here real quick. There's nothing major here. I have a basic trigger. It's calling your domain class where it's handling after insert, right? And this is calling a little services class to basically just do a simple kind of aggregation based on, you know, which type of beverage came in or which type of pizza came in, aggregate the scores for me and update our appropriate record, whether it's the bourbon record, the Scotch record, the pizza record, whichever one. So again, fairly simple concept, but to highlight the point, this is my subscriber and this is my event bus, right? So I have 2 of 3 pieces, but I still need a publisher. And in this case, Salesforce is not going to be the publisher. We're going to use Workbench as the publisher, mostly because I couldn't get Postman set up in time. So my apologies. Don't make fun of me so much. But I meant to get that set up in time and I messed that part up. But I am going to copy this. I have a quick little composite service here. For those of you not familiar with this, it doesn't really matter. This is just me making a web service call in saying, hey, I want to dispatch an event. I want you to tell the beverage review that I'm giving a Scotch review of 3 and another Scotch review of 3 and another one of 3 and one of 1 and one of 4. Here's my bourbon reviews. Here's my New York hand toss reviews, and then my Chicago deep dish reviews. So I'm going to execute this, and it's going to make me log in again, of course, yes, because it's Workbench. So there we go. All right, let's go back to that. Okay, so now we'll execute that. I'll be sure real quick that these are queued up for those of you interested in the other side of that actual response to those web services. It should come back with operation and queued, and it's going to give you an actual ID to each one of those messages that got published. This is a unique ID on that record that I said I'd come back to later. I will show you this again. And then there's a little bit of the message that got essentially serialized. But all of these got published in here essentially. And what that does for us in our app is that all these little reviews will get created. Here we go. The reviews themselves aren't important. And then our aggregate code went through and gave us an average score on our beverages and gave us an average score on our pizza. Now, bear in mind, as you guys will see in the files, there's no smoke and mirrors here. There is no custom REST inbound service for this. There's nothing along with that. There's no direct communication to these tables, right? So therefore, there's no triggers on these tables specifically doing the aggregate query. That's all handled just by our third-party system, talking to the platform event, and then us reacting to the platform event, which means not only can I accept a payload from a third-party system, like Workbench in this case, I could build my own custom Lightning component for my users in the community, which just fire an event. All that logic's done. I could have something on the case for when we're actually on a phone with that customer, right? They just click the button. Here's the score, fires the event. All the logic's done. So it really buys you that capability to just tack in publishers when you need to, change how your subscribers react when you need to. They're all separate from each other. They're all independent. It makes it very, very easy to manage. The events themselves, the example I gave you, of course, is coming into Salesforce. But all of those events that I published, again, this can be listened to by Dell Boomi. This can be listened to by MuleSoft. This can be listened to by many third-party integration systems that are just reacting to those platform events, okay? And again, soon to be AWS forward-looking statement. Okay. So bear that in mind. So yeah, so continuing with that, hopefully I've excited you enough to start exploring that, start ripping apart your environment, looking for potential replacements. But before you use them for everything, let's talk about some design considerations and go back to some of these earlier questions as well, kind of highlight some points there that were brought up. Nothing you do, and this is true for Salesforce or any technology you build on, I don't care what it is. Like we've all been around the block, I'm sure. Anything you do costs you something. It's costing you money and more resources. It's costing you more server space. It's costing you more development time. Salesforce, that cost is governance limits, right? And there's a monetary cost, of course, but governance limits should always be considered whenever you pick an architectural design for anything. I'm a huge, huge proponent of that. I love those governance limits. I do. And the better you know the limits of what you're working with, the better the better you're going to be prepared for that long-term picture. So let's talk about some of these when it comes to platform events, which are extremely tricky enough that I actually met with Salesforce people to be like, you guys need to explain this because your documentation is terrible. So hopefully this helps you guys when it comes to your considerations. So first off, platform events are not a record in a database. You cannot requery them. Okay. You can query to see how many events you fired, and you can query to see how many events have been delivered. Both of those are there, and I have a link to that query at the end of this presentation. You can check it out. But you can't just load it like you can an account to be like, oh, well, what was the bourbon score for this one specific record? That concept doesn't exist. They only last for a couple days, up to 72 hours. Then they're trashed. So they are not something that you use for storage. That is intentional, of course. They should just be processed very quickly. They can only have a trigger after insert, which, as you see, right, makes sense because you can't. It's not a storage. It's not a record. There is no before update. That's why you don't have master detail. That's why you don't have lookup relationships. That's why you don't have formulas. It's just this is data in a payload, in a message. Your events process is automated user, as I pointed out. And a very, very dangerous one is that, oops, I didn't mean to click that. You can replay your messages, and that's what the replay ID is on your platform event. And I'll bounce back to that screen in a second. If I fired event number 1 today, and a month from now, a third-party system or a piece of Salesforce code that you wrote says, hey, I want you to replay from event number 1, Salesforce is going to try to fire event number 1, which doesn't exist because it's past 72 hours, right? Because this is a month later in our example. And that still counts against your delivery limit, which means you got dinged for it. But depending on how you ask for that to be replayed, it will not only try to fire that, it will try to refire every event after event number 1. So if you want to find the quickest possible way to run out of your daily allotment of platform events, it is to mess up your replay ID. So play with it. It's powerful. It's useful, but you need to be very, very cautious with that, particularly if you're explaining it to a third-party group, a third-party development team who may not be as familiar with Salesforce. Very, very important on how they request events. Speaking of third-party integration teams that may not be as familiar with Salesforce, the biggest problem with it not being a record in a database to start off, I forgot to remove notes, so I'll leave those in there for you guys. But the biggest problem with it not being a record in the database during build is that you're going to get asked, hey, did you fire this event? And you're going to be like, yes. And they're going to be like, well, how do you know? And you're like, well, I don't. I just published the event. Like, I can't query it. I can't reload it. So that's where the query, I have it in the example files, will come into play a little bit later. And you can obviously put your own trigger on just to see it firing. But when you are creating fields on your platform event, this is why you only have basic data points, because it's not a record. You can't reload it. So also will take us into slide number 2, which will come back to the question that was asked earlier from me. Event types for high volume and published behavior. So in your published behavior, high volume, give me 1 second, I'll almost skip that for a second. But when you're on your published behavior, when you're publishing events, it's kind of unique the way they present it. But what Salesforce is trying to bring across here is that if the event is successfully committed, if you're publishing after commit, what Salesforce is saying is we are guaranteeing that we have all the data in your event ready, completed. It didn't fail the process. Like, it actually ran through our queuing system. So that if you publish your event after you have committed, which is the default, then they're pretty much guaranteeing any listener that data will be there for that listener. Okay. When you publish immediately, they're basically saying if something goes wrong, you're telling your third-party listeners that an event was still published, but we, Salesforce, can't guarantee what data is available to that third-party system. So I'm gonna dumb that down the way I had to dumb it down for me, so hopefully this helps. If it's the information that matters, publish after commit. And that's pretty much, again, that's the default. That's pretty much the best way to go. If it's the fact something happened, right? Like an error happened, potentially is the best use case I can generally think of for. Like, an error happened. We need to ping a third-party system. So it knows, regardless of what that error was, we just need to at least tell people something wrong happened, publish immediately. Because then even if you don't get the data, at least people are getting a message that something failed. So does that answer the question that was asked earlier, first off?
I had asked about it. There's another reason you may want to publish immediately, and that is if you're doing, if you're firing a platform event and you're making a call out. So anybody that's ever made an HTTP call out in the same method where you are doing DML, you can run into problems because the DML won't commit if you've made this call, okay? And in DML, sort of, but if you publish immediate, it does not care if you're doing a call out. It just publishes and it does not wait for anything else. So it can be handy in that situation.
Yes, that is a good point. If you are saving records at the same time that you're publishing events, definitely. I generally suggest be somewhat cautious with that, but very common with triggers, for example. And that is a very good point where you can also use the publish immediately. But you do have to be cautious about the data still. If the data matters, I would still stick with publish after commit, even in that scenario. FYI, if the data of the event matters. But yes, good point there. Okay, then back to some other considerations here. And this goes into the only available option now when you create a platform event for event type, which is high volume. So some of you working in older orgs may have, and some of you may have started playing with platform events before everything was kind of forced to high volume. It's the only option you have available today. So back in the day, you can make events that are standard volume. So standard volume events have way lower limits, much lower. I don't remember all the details, but you get lower publishing limits, you get lower subscribing limits. They just weren't as powerful. I strongly suggest that if you have anything on standard events, that you upgrade them. Unfortunately, I have tried both upgrading via metadata through, unlock packages or changing the metadata directly. And I've also tried to upgrade by rebuilding an event as high volume versus standard volume and just installing that second generation package into your environment. And it would still not override the event type. So it may be a challenge, but high volume gives you a much higher limit than standard volume, and you can't even pick standard volume anymore, essentially, as you'll see in the help text here. So yes, stick with high volume. If you're using events for your web services or for anything really, but particularly with web services, it's important to note the size of the message of your event is 1 megabyte. It's actually not very big when it comes to web services particularly. Try to keep your events, in my opinion, they should be short to the point, right? Bare minimum data, have the third-party system requery into Salesforce if they need additional data as much as possible. Or have your Apex code requery if they need to, as much as possible. Avoid the long text fields though. We've definitely experienced problems with long text fields because it's very easy to make the size of your message greater than 1 megabyte if you have a lot of fields and you have a fully populated long text field. So bear in mind, as I was saying with the async portion earlier, you can buy additional events not tied to user counts, which is extremely helpful. It makes this extremely scalable versus batch jobs, async jobs, future calls, right? Much better in that regard. But the limits, the publishing limits versus the subscriber limits, actually, I think that's on the next slide. I might have jumped ahead. We'll talk about that in a second, but we do have to be somewhat conscious of that, which I'll get to. Before I get to that, sorry, jump the gun. The event queues, platform events are designed to be cleared very quickly. They will fire up to 2,000 messages at once. And I'm not talking like your typical, what you might be thinking as a trigger where it's processing, 200 records at a time, although your triggers on your platform events would still attempt to do that. But it's still dropping in 2,000 messages at once for you to process. You might be thinking my code can't handle 2,000 messages at once. That is a default. You can actually change that as of Spring 21. You can change the metadata for the number of events that you want to fire. in a particular platform event. And you can also change the metadata so that it's not running as automated user if you have a special use case for that, if that's a consideration. So those options are available now, but you should note it'll publish up to 2,000 messages at once. So that can be interesting. And then for those of you writing unit tests against these, of course, like a future call, these will fire after you run a stop test command, but you can force it to fire in a test context. And that is simply just calling, this is where I'm forcing it to fire in a stop test context. This is in the test pizza event. And in this file, you can force with a get event bus and deliver your messages during your test context if you need to force those events to happen. So both are available. Just as an FYI, you do need to be aware of that command if you need it to fire within your test context. Okay. Big one as far as the limits go, which was very interesting to learn. This took a while to get a hang of, so hopefully I can explain this right the first time for you guys. But while you can publish 250,000 events an hour, which is beautiful, you can only receive 50,000 events a day. And you might be thinking that makes literally no sense. And I agree, because that's what I thought. But here's essentially how it works. Triggers, anything that's not an open thread, all right, a threaded concept. This Comet library, which is that Lightning web component that I showed you earlier, or if MuleSoft was listening to your platform event, I'm gonna at the simplest way possible, they're keeping a thread open against the Salesforce server, and they're asking, did something happen? Did something happen? Did something happen? Did something happen? Right? Actually, I think it goes the other way around, but it's basically that cost is what you're paying for at the 50K a day. So you could publish 250,000 an hour, but if you have a third-party system listening to that, they're only going to get 50,000 before you start running out of platform events in that day. However, within your own Salesforce environment, your triggers don't count, your flows don't count, your process builders don't count. All that stuff can listen. Your code within, try not to use process builders, in my opinion, but all that stuff can listen to platform events, right? And that's free. That doesn't cost you anything. You can buy add-ons at your very first add-on level. You get 150K in that day, and that is a 24-hour rolling limit. As I noted, it's not a hard reset. You get 150,000 in that rolling limit, and you get 4.5 million for the month. We have definitely pressed the number of events with Salesforce. They've generally been pretty decent. We've run more than what we normally should, so I obviously can't guarantee that for everybody. But in general, at 1 to 2 add-ons, you can do a lot. So your bare minimum level, you'll get your 50K a day at least. If you're going to use it for a lot of things, I would suggest at least buying one add-on or checking that out. How many your org has is a platform limit, which means just like batch jobs, for example, if you guys have orgs with managed packages, all those asynchronous calls those managed packages are using, that counts against your number, your org's limit of 250K a day. Platform events, unfortunately, do the same thing. So you do need to be aware of that as they get more popular with managed packages. How many subscribers you have is an actual limit. I think it's like 100. It's a very big number, but there is a limit to how many subscribers can be on one platform event. That accounts everybody, third-party systems listening to it, and your internal works. And remember that the Apex platform event is still a trigger, so you cannot make callouts, your own custom HTTP callouts from that trigger, because it still counts as a triggered context. Rumor, I don't even know if this forward-looking statement. It's a total rumor. There is apparently talks of treating platform events triggers differently than standard triggers, but I would not put any stock into that yet, but there may be potential in the future. But as it stands right now, they're treated the same with execution context and what they can and can't do. Kind of last but not least that I would throw in with your governance limits and things to consider with this is that if I publish one event, and if you think back to that first slide where I gave that example, we had one event being published, we had 2 platform events in our event bus, we had topic A and topic B, right? And then we had 3 subscribers. Let's say all 3 of those subscribers were external. They were a Comet D style, right? Lightning components or a third-party integration system. The publisher publishing to both platform events, topic A and topic B. I'll go back to that slide real quick, right? Publishing to both those events, that's 2 publish counts because I'm publishing to 2 different platform events. So keep that in mind. Not one. This is not one publish event. Even though it's one publisher, I'm publishing to 2 events for every message. So that's 2 publish counts per 1 message. All 3 of those subscribers who are listening to those messages, that counts as a received, that counts against your received limits for those listeners. So this publisher publishes 1 event to topic A, and then there are 2 subscribers getting that event. So that's 1 published and 2 received, right? Plus the published to topic B, so that's 1 more published, and then there's 1 subscriber, so that's 1 more received. So bear that in mind with your limits. That's very important because as you add more listeners to your system, if your architecture is not set up to kind of have a central gateway or central communication hub or central, API system that everything kind of talks to, everything you start tacking onto your platform events will count as a subscriber to that single message. So those all count against your received limits. So important to note. Easy to lose track of if you don't know that up front. So and then why should you listen to me? So again, mostly because I've broken stuff. That's about it, honestly. But I do think everybody should do their own research, and you should all play with your own stuff, of course, as much as possible. With that in mind, I did give references to kind of everything. I gave you I like to describe these as this is curated information, right? But there's a lot more information. But these are what I think is the most kind of important running points. All these links are within the PowerPoint, which again, you guys could get a copy of. Platform Events Developers Guide, specifically with limits and testing, and then the general intro where you could go through the whole thing. These trailhead ones, you could go through the basics and then build your own. They'll take you about 30 minutes. It's great intro stuff. Here's some metadata examples for configuring your own batch size and running user. Because remember, your platform events by default will be the automated process user. And by default, they'll try to process 2,000 messages. So you can change those if you need to. You can force your triggers. You can force your platform events to pause and refire. Here's some examples on that, essentially. If you're interested in the Comet D library, which is the JavaScript connection portion that I was talking about for custom UIs, but it's also actually used by that Lightning Web Components that I showed you an example of that's in here. There's actually a link to their org, so you can check that out from the JavaScript side. That example LWC that I showed you where I copied that code from, there's tons of stuff there in that sample gallery. I don't know if you guys have seen that by chance on Trailhead or not. For the most part, it doesn't have anything to do with platform events, but it is so cool to just find different examples. So I wanted to throw it in here. You should check them out if you haven't. And then here is an article to tooling API queries. And this is stuff where it'll show you how you could query platform events that have been fired, where you could query how many events that have been received. So this documentation will help you write some tooling API queries so you can see that information during your testing and build phase and stuff like that. So just for general items. And that takes us to our final Q&A, which I will wrap up with one last thing before I open it up to you guys. Scotch can only be made in Scotland. There's actually a couple different criteria. It is a legal definition, though, and from grow to bottle, it is a Scotland product. Bourbon is actually that for America. So you can buy a single malt whiskey from anywhere, but if it's a single malt Scotch, it's from Scotland. If you buy a bourbon, it's from America. Because that is, and again, there's lots of things that go into bourbon too, as far as the type of grain and stuff that they use, and there's different classifications. But bourbon itself is an American thing. Scotch is a Scotland product. So
speaking on behalf of Kentucky, bourbon is from Kentucky, not just from America. If it's from Tennessee, it's sipping whiskey.
I don't know about us Texans, right, though?
like Jack Daniels.
Jack
Daniels
Daniels is Tennessee whiskey, right?
It's Tennessee whiskey. It does not call itself bourbon.
Yes. They're very proud about that, too, actually. To not be a bourbon. Yes, to be a Tennessee whiskey. So
Yeah, fine.
And that's it. Yeah, thank you guys. So what questions might I have missed? Sorry, I feel like I missed it. Thank you. And I came here because of the link from our Austin user group here. So thank you guys again very much. So hopefully some of you other folks will I'll be watching you next time. But yes. So.
You put a lot of excitement and thought into this project. It was really riveting and engaging. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
I posted a sample code. It didn't format well over in the chat, but anytime that I publish events, I save the result. So instead of just calling the eventbus.publish, I make it database.saveResult and then give it a variable name equals eventbus.publish. And then after it publishes, you can check the success on that and do a system debug statement. Or if it failed, you can put out the error codes and the message.
Instead of using okay. If you want to react to it failing, essentially. Yeah, exactly.
Well, or if you want to look back, during development, if you want to look in your logs and make sure that it fired. I find that really, I've got kind of a standard method that I use for publishing all my events, and it's just part of the template.
Yeah. And I think actually it leads to a good point. I think you guys will discover when you start playing with these, the actual publishing of the event, that's like rinse and repeat. Like it takes our developers an hour to stand up a new event because it's just so commonplace. It's like, here's the object, we run our code that puts it all together, we publish this thing. So it's really a fast turnaround for product purposes also, which is important, right? We all like to build cool stuff, but we do have to get things done sometimes, I guess. I don't know. They say so. But anyway, so it is a really fast turnaround time for those as you get used to that pattern. So yeah, really good.
Sweet. Other questions?
Yes.
Hey, what are some common examples of subscribers? That subscriber is just kind of abstract.
Yeah, so subscribers, and I am mostly going to speak, of course, from our experience at Evolve, right? But subscribers in general could be your Apex code via triggers, okay? Your flows, Apex flows, or not Apex flows, sorry, your Lightning flows. And those are getting more and more powerful by the day, so very fan of those. And then you can have your Lightning components as the example that I showed you with that. But primarily those third-party systems, that is where, personally for us, is super powerful. That's one of them when it comes to the subscriber question specifically. So we have Dell Boomi listening to that. We've had Heroku listening to that. We have AWS kind of listening to that. We had to do a little kind of workaround because EventBridge won't directly hook up to it yet. Supposedly that is coming, forward-looking statement. But it is so useful in those third-party integrations as subscribers go. And then the other way around, like what we showed, or what I showed with the Workbench example, you could just have those third-party systems. Like we do have some very complex custom REST APIs, and we have some basic ones where our Dell Boomi system will just put a record in the table. But we also have platform events that they can just talk to, and then we can do whatever we want with the information off that with our own Apex subscribers. So very powerful in that nature. But your typical subscribers, third-party systems, Apex code, flows, UIs are probably the most common that we utilize, at least. Yeah.
Do we have to configure the third-party systems to listen to the platform events? Do we need to do any kind of configuration inside Salesforce to enable that?
Great question. You don't for the event itself. Most of those systems actually have a little special connector, like this is their connector to listen to platform events. And so you just set up for what event you're listening to and stuff. But with all those systems, they do have to have a connected app. They have to have an API user. So you still need all the basics for the integration, but you shouldn't need anything special. You would need that if you're just doing a common REST service. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, I find as a subscriber, LWCs subscribing to a platform event, it's the way of maintaining that live connection between your loaded page and the server. because normally if something changed on the server, you wouldn't know it on your page unless you refreshed. But if you've got using EMP API, which is just sort of Salesforce's packaged version of Comet D, it's maintaining a long pole connection. So basically when it first loads up, it says, hey, tell me if I'm subscribing to this, tell me if that happens. And it just, and by the way, here's my browser session ID. And that way, when something happens, the server says, boom, out, sending it out, and the EMP API subscription says, hey, browser session this just happened. And then it updates immediately on your screen. So it's really very, gives you a real sense of responsiveness and liveness to your browser session.
I have a follow-up question on that one. If you're using EMPA API with LWC, it looks like there's like a limit where you could have maximum 2,000 concurrent Comet D connections, which is what EMPI uses. Yep. Do you guys ever run up against that? Is that like a big limitation, or is it just kind of like you don't have to worry about it?
I haven't broken it yet.
Okay.
I don't. Let me think about it. I don't want to speak out of turn. I wouldn't ignore it because it is a limit, but I can't think of how I would break it.
Yeah.
It's pretty big.
EMP API is such a huge improvement on Comet D. I mean, it is Comet D under the hood, but it's just sort of managing multiple. So in a browser, let's say you've got 3 different components. If they each had a subscription to Comet D, every time a new one loaded, it would cancel out the previous subscription that was set up. And so you could only have one per browser, not per component. Per browser. EMP API handles that one subscription and acts as a router for it to channel it to all the different components on the page.
Yeah. And then let me reword it another way. For me, as like a new user, to me, it sounds like you can only have 2,000 users logged in using that Lightning Web Component at a time. So what if your user base is like 20,000 users? Like, are they all opening up concurrent sessions at the same time, canceling each other out back and forth?
I don't know. That's way above anything I've ever done.
Okay.
Actually, I think that would count, though. I do think that would count, yes, when you put it in that context. Like, we have 500 users, so my apologies. I probably wasn't thinking of that. But yes, I do. Each one of those should count as its own connection, so that would be an issue, I think, yes. Yes, that could be, yeah.
Yeah, for that, so I didn't use it for that situation. I was going to use platform events to basically do some custom actions, but I saw that limit and straight away. And I use the wire service, basically Lightning data service. And then I manipulated the database to basically send the event that I wanted to hook into.
Oh, that's a good workaround. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a nice workaround. Okay, cool. I'm done with asking about those limits. I know it's kind of a strange question.
Oh, no, it's good. It's good. The limits, you should, that's the one to ping the most, trust me.
Yeah.
On a project we recently did, Pradeep discovered something that was undocumented. That is, we were creating a Lightning Web Component that was running in Community. And EMP API specifically says it does not support communities. So we thought we were out of luck. But he discovered, undocumented, that the older Comet D library still works in communities. So you can use Comet D and subscribe to a platform event. That's what we ended up doing.
Nice. I'm catching up on the comments. You guys' comments are good. Awesome.
Have any questions? I'm going to drop the link one more time in chat for the gift card giveaway. It's a opt-in, so feel free to sign up or don't sign up. We'll give a couple minutes and then I'll share my screen and spin our magical wheel to see who's been chosen. while we're giving it a few minutes, JJ, your presentation was so good. Like, I don't think I can think about platform events and not think about whiskey now.
That's right. Don't say that at work.
We're all remote. It's okay. It's 5 o'clock somewhere in some time zone.
Great. Thank you. And again, thank you guys for having me. Thank you all for attending. I appreciate it. So if you have other questions, let me know. I am in the Austin user group. If you're not, you should ping the Slack chat there. Very handy. Yes.
All right. If we don't have any more people, okay, I'll share my screen. Let's Chrome tab. Okay, so we have everyone that was in there added to the list. And random pop-ups, but let's go for the first spin. So we're giving out 4 gift cards. First winner is Courtney. And Courtney, I hope you're still here. Yes. Let's see, is Courtney still here? Or did she leave? You have to be present to win. Going once, going twice. We're spinning again.
I'll be right back. I'm going to grab the cat.
Sounds good. Satish, I think I have it correctly. Are you okay?
Yeah, that's correct. Yep, I'm here.
Yes, perfect. First
Thank
gift
you.
card goes to you. It's going to be a $50 gift card to the Trailhead North American store. And we will email you later today.
Thank you.
All right, let's spin for our second winner. Andrew, are you still here?
I am.
Perfect. Second gift card winner. Just checking these off. Exciting.
Woo!
Yes.
Yay! I'll even turn my camera on for this.
Congratulations. Super exciting.
Cool. Thank you.
I'll work
We'll
mine
send
into
you.
the next presentation.
All right, and for our last.
Look at those eyes.
Oh my goodness, so sweet.
I can't see.
Oh, so cute.
Let me see.
So sweet.
Oh.
Say hi, Bobo. Yeah.
Those eyes, my goodness.
Yeah.
He's very mad at me right now, but yes.
Because you haven't been petting him for the last hour.
He's been hiding because we're house sitting and there's a dog here, so he's not used to the dog yet. So yeah, had to go grab him.
Melissa, can I just say I love?
Thank you. I love color.
Final spin. Pat.
Yay!
Woohoo! I'm here.
We know you're here. You asked all the great questions.
Sorry.
Perfect. Oh no, we love your questions. I love to geek out over things like this. All right, so these are our 4 gift cards, and then we have one more, JJ. So we're giving you a gift card. Thank you so much for presenting to our group. We're always looking for speakers. We can stay on the call for a little bit longer. We'll post the recording to the same link that you came to register. So just check back in 24 to 48 hours. And then the deck we will post in the community group, the Slack group. And if I remember, I'll send out an email as well to all the attendees.
Awesome. Thank you guys very much again. So,
Thank you. Great.
So much.
Thank
Thanks
you,
for
everyone.
sharing.
Bye.
Have a good rest of your week.
Yeah.
for the camera, dude.
I didn't think cats like to be picked up.